every now and then you get a glimpse of the people who actually exercise real power in the United States. They're not the Lindsey Grahams of the world, or the Marco Rubios of the world, or the Chuck Schumers of the world, the people who are elected to high political office and cast their little votes on all the bills that come up. Far more often than not, agreeing with one another, the two parties are, because the most consequential policies are actually a matter of bipartisan consensus, because the establishment wings of both parties are funded by the same oligarchs. The real power lies with the oligarchs, the people with all the wealth. And many of them, not all, but many, like to avoid the spotlight where they exercise power in the dark. And one of the people who had been doing that is named Bill Ackman. And yet he decided that the attack on October 7th in this other country didn't even happen in the United States, wasn't an attack on our country. It was an attack on a foreign country, but it was a foreign country that he loves deeply and cares intensely about. And he decided it was worth becoming as public as possible in order to essentially do two things. One, destroy the lives and reputation and career prospects of anybody who criticized Israel too harshly. And number two, ensure that our major universities could no longer allow harsh criticisms of Israel or defenses of the Palestinian cause, that greater speech controls were needed, greater censorship was needed. And because these universities rely on people like Bill Ackman, who donate hundreds of millions of dollars, so their name goes on buildings at Harvard and Penn, they have a lot of power over what these institutions of higher learning can and can't do and can and can't say. And it's not often they use their power in public. They do it in private. They pick up the phone, they call the university president, they say, I hear there's a class where this professor expressed this view that seems very offensive. Are you going to look into this? Or I heard there was an event that is going to have some speakers whose views I find offensive. Are you sure you want to have that event? Because if you do, I would probably seriously reconsider my commitments to continue to donate to your school. A lot of conservatives, a lot of people on the right, a lot of pro-Israel supporters recently celebrated when the president of Penn was fired, Liz McGill. And the reason that was given was that she had gone before Congress and was questioned in a very manipulative way about whether the policy of Penn is violated when a student advocates genocide of Jews. And the reason I say it was a manipulative way is because the part of the video that viralized had no context to it. The context, both at that hearing and more broadly, is an attempt by the Bill Ackmans of the world, by the people who wield the greatest power over our discourse, to start redefining criticism of Israel as genocide advocacy. And it's not unlike what left liberal advocates of censorship do. They take right-wing speech on race, policing, affirmative action, immigration, trans issues, and they redefine it. They say what people on the right really mean when they oppose affirmative action and immigration and police reform and the right of trans kids to seek medical care and transition, what they really mean is kill all black people, kill all immigrants, kill all trans people. So when we censor them, we're not censoring political speech, we're censoring incitement to murder against vulnerable minority groups. And the American right has been horrified by this attempt. This is censorship. They're smearing our reputation by calling us racists and saying our speech is inciting violence. And yet, since October 7th, any criticisms of Israel, any attempt to oppose the Israeli war in Gaza, any attempts to call for a ceasefire, any attempts to criticize Israel for the broader conflict because of their occupation of the West Bank and blockade of Gaza, gets redefined as advocacy for genocide, calling for the murder of all Jews. So when people like Elise Stefanik, the Republican congresswoman from New York, who conducted this questioning of the University of Presidents, and then multi-billionaires like Bill Ackman, this hedge fund manager, want to censor Israel criticism, they don't say, oh, we're here to censor Israel criticisms. they use the left liberal tactic first. They say, this isn't Israel criticism, this is advocacy of genocide. And when you point out, well, actually, there aren't people on college campuses going around chanting, gas the Jews or kill all Jews, as is claimed, they'll say, oh no, they don't say that, but that's what they secretly mean when they're criticizing Israel, when they're calling for a ceasefire, when they're defending Palestinian rights. What they secretly mean is genocide against Jews. So we're not censoring, we're just punishing genocide advocacy. That's the game that Bill Ackman has been playing. He's a censorship opponent, leading a pro-censorship campaign at American universities. Many of them have been doing this since before October 7th, have been opposed to the administrations of these universities before October 7th due to their refusal to censor Israel critics with enough vigor, as robustly as these billionaires want. And then they exploited October 7th and the emotions around it to gather people up and say, look what these universities are permitting, this free speech, which we're going to call genocide advocacy. And then a lot of people on the right, not all, but a lot, said, look, I'm a free speech absolutist. I believe in free speech, but this is too far for me. This should not be allowed, these ideas. Now, one of the first things Bill Ackman did before he went on the censorship crusade at American universities was he helped call for the names of students who signed a statement condemning Israel after the Hamas attack for saying the conflict is the fault of Israel. He demanded that their names, all of their names, be publicized. And they didn't actually get the names of the students who agreed with this statement. They got the names of the students who are members of the group, the groups that signed the statement. So some of them didn't even agree with the statement. Some of them hadn't even been members of these groups, but they circulated a list of students. And Bill Ackman led the way in saying, let's circulate this list, and I pledge as a CEO I will never hire these people, and I hope my fellow CEOs of hedge funds and banks will also pledge never to hire them. That is pure cancel culture, at least as the right has been calling it, and many on the right stood up and turned him into a folk hero. Here's CNN, October 11th. Harvard student groups issued an anti-Israel statement. CEOs want them blacklisted. Quote, billionaire hedge fund CEO Bill Ackman and several other business leaders are demanding Harvard University release the name of students whose organizations signed on to a letter blaming Israel for the deadly attacks by Hamas, blaming solely Israel. Quote, one should not be able to hide behind a corporate shield when issuing statements of supporting the actions of terrorists, Ackman said on a post on X, formerly known as Twitter. If the members support the letter, the names of the signatories, quote, should be made public so their views are publicly known, Ackman said. Those views were publicly known, where those names were publicly disclosed. We interviewed two of the students at Harvard whose names were put on a blacklist. Pro-Israel groups then paid for trucks to ride through the campus with their names and faces on it, calling them anti-Semitic. They bought websites with the names of these students in the URL. So if Tom Smith signed one of those letters, it would be tomsmith.com, and you go to tomsmith.com, there's a gigantic photo of Tom Smith with the name anti-Semite, the label anti-Semite on his forehead. To about 19, 20, 21-year-old kids who signed a letter critical of Israel, blaming Israel for the conflict and thus the Hamas attack. And there was an attempt to say in the United States these people shouldn't be hired, using billionaire wealth to do it. Now, since then, Bill Ackman has also tried to apply similar pressure to Harvard that one of his fellow billionaire hedge funds successfully applied at Penn, causing the firing of the Penn president. Now, as we showed you last night, this attempt to silence and punish Israel critics on college campus using coarse censorship techniques is not some new tactic that Israel supporters suddenly started using as a way of showing the American left what censorship is like, to try and do this tit-for-tat censorship. This kind of censorship of Israel critics, getting professors fired and student groups banned, has been going on for many years on American college campuses. In fact, it's one of the most common forms of censorship that I've been reporting on for many years, as have many other people. And the attempt to have billionaires demand the firing of the Penn president began prior to October 7th, because there was a literary festival of Palestinian authors that was going to take place on the Penn campus. And because some of these billionaires who donate a ton of money to Penn don't like some of the people who are participating in this event, claim they were anti-Semitic, they demanded the Penn president cancel the event. And she said, I'm not going to cancel this event. We have free speech here at Penn. If you want to challenge the things that they're saying, go to the event and question them or challenge them, or hold a separate event with critics of theirs. But I'm not going to cancel an event because billionaire donors to our school dislike the views of some of the speakers because they're too critical of Israel. That was the real reason they wanted her head on a pike. It was a censorship campaign. And that's what Bill Ackman has been doing at Harvard. Now, the New York Times today has a profile of Bill Ackman and his long campaign against Harvard, a lot of which is based in petty resentments that they don't immediately jump and obey whatever he tells them to do about what kind of classes they can have, what kinds of teachers they're permitted to empower and hire, what kinds of views they permit. Here's this billionaire folk hero. Quote, the billionaire investor has mounted a high-profile battle against Harvard President Claudine Gay over anti-Semitism and threats to Jewish students on campus, but long-held personal grudges may play a part too. Mr. Ackman, by his own admission and according to others around him, resents that officials at his alma mater, Harvard, to which he's donated tens of millions of dollars, and its president, Claudine Gay, have not heeded his advice on a variety of topics. Imagine being a billionaire. You have several billion dollars. This is the kind of wealth that is inconceivable to have. Not only can you buy multiple enormous sprawling mansions and fly around the world in a private jet, the level of your personal consumption is just inconceivable. But you can make and break anything you want. You have enormous power, and so you're constantly surrounded by people who are telling you how great you are. I've worked with billionaires before. I've seen how they're treated. They have a coterie of people around them constantly yesing them to death and telling them how wonderful they are. They're never used to hearing no. And so Bill Ackman calls Harvard, which has an endowment of, I think it's $100 billion at this point. It's basically just a financial institution with decorations as classrooms. It's a gigantic holder of real estate, and it's a vastly wealthy institution. And even Bill Ackman's hundreds of millions of dollars often can't get him his way at Harvard, and so he's been furious. And has been on this crusade against Harvard because of it. Quote, most recently, this includes how to respond to complaints of anti-Semitism and the specter of violence against supporters of Israel on campus. On Tuesday, Harvard's board announced that Dr. Gay, its first black president, would stay in her post despite calls for her removal. Though Mr. Ackman's campaign, which has included the accusation that she was hired in part because of her race and gender, failed to unseat her, he succeeded in shaping the debate about anti-Semitism at universities and showcasing questions about the power of major donors to dictate the direction of elite institutions. I mean, whatever your view on the Israel-Gaza war, whatever your views are in Israel, no matter how much you love this foreign country, we should all be able to agree that we do not want the boundaries of free speech and the content of classrooms at our major universities being dictated by the wealthiest donors to those schools. So that anyone who donates a few $100 million to Harvard or Penn or Yale or Princeton or Brown can pick up the phone and say, this class needs to be canceled or else I'm going to cut my donations off to your school. That's blatantly unhealthy. And you cannot pretend to want free speech, especially to thrive at an academic institution. If there's one place we need in society that's supposed to be permissive of questioning of all pieties, of all orthodoxies, it's academic institutions, college campuses. That's why we have academic freedom and tenure for professors, so they are shielded from being fired for things they say. But what could be a greater threat than having these massive donors, these mega donors, be able to dictate to our universities what the range of views is they're permitted to air and the ones they have to punish and suppress. That's what these billionaires are trying to do, and they're exploiting the emotions around October 7th to succeed. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.